some property, but it's kind of unconventional. I said, well, what's unconventional about it? And they said, well, it's water. And I was like, oh, okay. We actually...
Basically a boat.
Right. And so then we got into sort of that balancing act between, is it a boat? Is it a vessel? Is it a house? And so that was another one of the projects that was kind of really interesting.
You lost sleep over this one.
I lost sleep over it.
I lost sleep over the plane, and you lost sleep over a boat.
Yeah. I was like, it's a floating cabin. What could go wrong? So yeah, a lot of possibility for things to go sideways.
Exactly. But again, like these are a few other just kind of projects that we've done that were small spaces. Another boat is actually in Cambodia, and that was for an arts center that we did for a nonprofit. But it's all about like using small spaces and doing things that was really high impact, and at the end of the day, like design changing lives.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
The lower corner is like a silo. We had a 17-foot footprint, which you think you drive up to a silo and you're like, oh, there's tons of space, but it's all vertical, so there's really actually not a whole lot you can do with it, which was a whole different challenge. So this is. So what I love about standing here is you all know, like, how many are builders out here? Yeah? Raise your hands, be proud. Yes, awesome. How many are designers? I don't really probably have many designer friends in here. Yay! There's a few of us. What I love about working with Jonathan is, like, we really agree on kind of one thing. P.S. This is my old truck that I drove to Dallas yesterday with no AC. That was quite a trip. Her name's Pearl. We agree design and build should be inspired. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that one of the things that, like, we as an industry, as home builders, I look at construction from the bricks and mortar sense, and Kim kind of approaches it from the design sense. One of the things that really kind of hits home for me is that every home we build there's a certain amount of stewardship for each one of our homeowners. They're entrusting us to build them, to be good stewards of their investment, and at the same time also distill all those kind of hopes and dreams and thoughts about their design into something that they can afford.
Yeah, for most people, this is one of their biggest investments, so it's something that we take
very seriously.
Yeah, and have fun. Okay, so we're here to talk about tiny homes. Like, what is the big deal about the tiny home movement? How many of you are skeptical? Oh, don't lie. I already had someone walk up to me and say, I doubt I can fit in one of your tiny homes. I promise the tiny homes are bigger than this.
Right.
But great job, Reliant. We love this. What is the big deal? Like, what do you think, Jonathan?
I think right now one of the things that we're seeing is that millennials in particular, they're a market that I think a lot of us as builders and construction professionals we look at is what they want and what they need is kind of a moving target. We're always kind of going, what they may want this year and what they may want next year may shift a little bit.
Yep.
But we're seeing a lot of them are interested in kind of downsizing, downsizing their spaces, downsizing kind of what they're interested in.
Yeah. It is. It's all about downsizing. And I think that, there's a shift also just in terms of where people are moving. More and more people are moving into the cities right now rather than the suburbs. And a lot of that's being driven because there's more small business entrepreneurs. Right. And so that shift means that people want to be near the city. And the city real estate is like prime real estate, right? So the tiny house movement is a whole new lifestyle. My hope today, our hope is that you walk away, if you were skeptical, going, oh, I kind of get it. And is it a fad? Well, let's see.
Right.
So it's all about freedom. Wow, that slide is funny. So it's all about freedom, like the quality of life, and you're talking about a smaller footprint, which is green, is efficient. Lower taxes.
Right. And one of the things that we're seeing a lot with millennials as well is they recognize that, when I first started working, I was kind of on the cusp of that generation where you realized you weren't going to work for the same company your entire career and then leave with the gold watch, the pension, and that was kind of how your career was going to go. A lot of the millennials now realize that they need to be mobile. They also recognize that they may not be in the same place 2 years from now, depending on where their career takes them. So there's a lot of influence on emphasis on sort of moving around and having the ability to pull up and move somewhere else pretty quickly.
Yeah, the mobility is a big factor, and I think people are like recognizing, like you said, you don't have to stay in one place, and a lot of our jobs are taking us all over. You've got like traveling nurses, bands, artists. I mean, there's a lot of different people that are coming to us that want this for different reasons. But most of it's about financial freedom. So let's talk about like what is average? Like what are you guys used to building versus what the tiny house is? One of the first questions is like, how big is a tiny house actually? Like, let's really think about that.
Yeah, and typically, it's tiny house is kind of defined as being a sort of generally roughly 300 square feet, somewhere between 100 and 400 square feet. One of the things that's been interesting is that we've seen, kind of historically, we've watched in the 50s, household sizes were, the average house is around 1,000 square feet, 980.
Beaver days.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it was 983 square feet. And we've watched the size of homes increase kind of incrementally over time, so that now the average home size, kind of based in 2014, 2015, was roughly 2,600 square feet. While at the same time, the number of people in the household has decreased. In the 50s, it was 3.5 people.
They were having more kids.
Right, and then now average household size is 2.67 people. I don't know how you get the 6'7", but how exactly.
It's a part of a person.
Don't know exactly how that works, but
It's
we're seeing smaller household sizes, larger homes, and also kind of larger kind of household debt.
Y'all, this is crazy. Like, look at this. The homes have gone up, and the number of family members has gone down. So, like, what does that say about our society? Anyway, yeah. So, average homes, they're like $130,000. You're talking about debt.
Right. The amount of debt that people are carrying now,
yes,
on average, is about $130,000 of consumer debt, and utilities run starting at $450 a month and going up. So for a lot of young people, that can be pretty daunting in terms of.
It's intimidating. Like,
yeah.
That's intimidating to take that on.
Yeah. So they look at rental costs.
Mm-hmm.
They may not purchase. They look at the rentals, utilities, everything else, and suddenly the cost of entry into the marketplace gets pretty daunting.
That's right. Whereas with a tiny home, you can get in faster and you owe less. Okay, so who wants a tiny home? Let's be honest. Here's a misconception. Most people think this is a generation that's like, oh, they love Instagram and they just want to like take their tiny home on the road and go take pictures of the Grand Canyon and post it because that looks cool. Yes, there are those people.
There are those people.
Those would be our millennials. So there's the open road adventure, they are looking to have a home office. Maybe they just graduated from college and they don't want to like settle down yet. People are getting married later. They're having less kids. We've already addressed that. And then, so there's those people. We kind of know why they want this. But then you go to Gen X and Y. Here's what I really honestly believe. Tiny homes run the gamut for all three generations, like from 25 to 65. I know this because I get the phone calls, y'all. I mean, this is just stats based on what I'm getting. So Gen X and Y, you've got a whole generation that maybe they have an established home, maybe you've already built them a home, they have a yard and they have they need a live workspace, or they have a parent that needs to come home. Like you've got the baby boomers who are maybe wanting to go back and live with their families and get closer to grandkids and downsize, because they realize that 2,600 square foot home with the boxes collecting dust in the attic they don't need that, but they don't take that when they die. So
right. Yeah, and as home builders, these are these requests and what people are using for this flex space. I think we've all had those clients that have come in and said, I need some flex space, whether it's a home office, whether it's a studio, whether it's guest space.
Yeah.
Or it's a space that is going to be an office now, but will become a nursery later, and then eventually when my teen comes back,
yeah.
During summers after college, or just doesn't move out, that's where they'll be living.
Totally. So like, let's not limit it to this age of this Instagram nation. It really does go from age 25 to 65, and we're getting those calls. But if we're here to address the millennials, because maybe this is a harder market for builders, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's, again, as I mentioned before, millennials are, again, they're kind of a moving target, and I think that there's also kind of a preconceived notion, which a lot of it goes back to what Kim was saying about the kind of Instagram, kind of walking around taking selfies and kind of playing Pokemon Go and doing all that.
Pokemon Go. I still don't understand that.
Yeah,
Pokemon Go. Does anyone understand that? Someone like got hit. Do you really? We have to talk later. I'm like don't understand it. You're walking around playing a game and then you get hit by a car. I don't.
But what's interesting about millennials is that statistically speaking, they're going to drive 2/3 of all the household formations over the next 5 years. 92% of them want and believe in kind of home ownership.
Yeah.
So what we get into is that break point between we want to own a house, but can we afford a house? And how do we kind of bridge that?
And they've seen it like their parents are the ones coming out of these decades of mortgages gone bad, and they don't want that for themselves.
Right.
Like that's a
right.
Yeah.
A lot of them kind of saw firsthand, or as being part of households that may have ended up upside down, or depending on the market they were in.
That's right.
Texas, we weren't completely insulated from that, but we were doing a lot better than some of the areas
Yeah,
in the
because
country.
Texas is the best state.
Right. But as a whole, they want
Right.
they want low maintenance.
Yes.
They want houses to be move-in ready.
Yes.
The formal dining room is something they really want to be replaced with a
Yeah, like
home office.
architecturally, definitely. People don't want that anymore. But they're tech savvy, super tech savvy.
Right. And at the end of the day, they just don't want to get saddled with a lot of debt.
Yeah. So, and maybe this isn't a long-term solution for them, but it's a very viable solution that works well right now. So
Right.
millennials, like we need to listen to this group because they're going to be driving a lot of the home sales here over the next decade.
Absolutely.
So who else wants a tiny home? So take age and generations out of the terminology, and let's just look at who, like anybody across the board. You've got this desire of freedom to roam, the free spirit. I kind of am under this classification personally, the free spirit. But the desire to go back to like live work. We've got the Etsy artists and the people that are trying to come up with their own small business. I mean, those numbers are rising. U.S. Census Bureau, like go look it up. It's true. Like more and more people in our country are starting their own businesses, which is beautiful. Like that was what our country was founded on. Sort of,
and the means of entry into the marketplace now have kind of come down, especially with easy access to internet, that sort of thing. A lot of companies are springboarding themselves and starting up, basing themselves out of the house, and they understand cash flow. They start in the house, then they eventually kind of grow into a larger company. But we've seen a lot of those types of clients want.
Yes, because they can't afford a commercial space yet.
Correct.
And so a tiny home could be the perfect option for them. Like put it in the backyard and you've got a home office, because then at the end of the day, working in your own home, we all, I do it, but it's not necessarily the most healthy thing psychologically. So take it outside of the home, set it in your backyard, and have a home office, right? Supplemental income is a whole nother thing. I had a client in Nashville, single mom, called me. She lives right off of 12th Street, really cool area. The Nashville's, up and coming, much like Austin's sister city, and she can't afford her taxes anymore because she lives in prime real estate. And so she's like, Kim, I need your help. Like, I need to build a tiny home, put it in the back, and then I'm going to rent out my main house so that my son and I can afford to live in this space that I've really put my roots down. So that is helping her pay her bills, and be able to afford love where she lives. So you've got the supplemental income, Airbnb.
Right.
Airbnb 2015 is their revenue sales were projected to be, or this year projected to be like 900 million on Airbnb.
Yeah.
And so how many people are,
Yeah, I think we all know someone that may either rent out a room in their house, a portion of their house, or if they're traveling, rent it while they're away, or frequent Airbnb kind of establishments, just so that that they either have supplemental income or they can kind of have a relatively reasonable place to stay when they're traveling. And so there's a whole sort of secondary market.
Yes.
And providing income to both private homeowners and businesses for rental space.
Totally. So if you can get that mortgage payment lower, then you have the extra money to be able to love where you live, and then also go do fun things like take dance classes and things like that, because that's what you want to do, right?
Right.
Okay. So, I promise the lines were not like that, but that's okay.
Looks like the format got a little wonky.
Okay, so Jonathan, here's questions that people ask, and do I build it on a trailer or a foundation?
Right, and a lot of that really depends on local municipality, kind of where you're building, some of the regulations that deal with In Austin in particular, we have ADUs, accessory dwelling units. A lot of other metro markets have the same thing. Depending on your end use, will really determine whether or not, whether you're building on a traditional foundation or whether you're going to be making this a mobile structure. Depending on what type of, how you build it, where you build it, that will also determine kind of how you're taxed.
Yeah.
It kind of opens up, not necessarily a can of worms, but it's a thread that kind of you'll need to follow in terms of taxation. Also local zoning oversight versus whether something's deemed to be an RV or kind of a mobile structure, which doesn't typically fall under the guise of or guidelines of a local inspections or zoning department.
Yeah, these are two that Jonathan built on the water and hanging over a cliff. Like, isn't this so cool? You're pretty cool.
Yeah, and these were completely off the grid, kind of tiny houses, kind of seasonal camps. One was
the one on the water is definitely off. That person doesn't want anybody around him.
Yes. Yeah, off the grid. And actually, he wasn't he an ornithologist? He studied birds.
I don't remember. Oh yes.
Studied birds.
Yeah.
Right. So the only way to access this, it was kind of in a swamp, was by canoe. So it was completely off the grid. Power was supplied by generator.
Like he doesn't have a pet dog, he has a pet crocodile.
Right.
Or alligator. I'm not sure the difference. Does
Right.
anyone really know the difference between a crocodile and an alligator?
Yeah, it gets into taxonomy and kind of structure the head. Okay.
Anyway.
All right.
You guys know how to build small things, right? You don't need us to tell you how to build something on a foundation.
Yeah, foundation design is we're all familiar with that. Whether you're using rebar, post tension, depending on the style of slab, that's not something we'll probably dig too deep into, just because it's something everyone here is familiar with. We'll be probably touching a little more on kind of some of the considerations for mobile structures, things that you want to consider when you're kind of taking it on the road, so you don't sort of get into a car accident, render yourself homeless, that kind of thing. So
that could happen if you don't build it right.
Right.
Okay, so trailers.
Yeah, and these are just some basic kind of rules of thumb in terms of some of the different configurations people use for trailers. You'll see you see them the use of flatbeds, double, triple, kind of high capacity axles. You'll see the use of gooseneck trailers.
I love the goosenecks from a design perspective because this is one that we did. You can actually build over the gooseneck and gain more square footage, which when you're building a tiny house, you're looking for square footage wherever you can find it.
Right. And as a general rule of thumb, the size of your trailer, in terms of feet, multiplied by 450 pounds a foot, is roughly what a finished out tiny house is going to weigh. So you get into a lot of, as you go up in weight, you get into some issues with, CDLs, gross combined vehicle weight ratios. A lot of that we're not going to get too deep into, but one of the things that we like to kind of recommend is that for kind of the average consumer, that they keep the weight of their structure down 10,000 pounds or less.
So you don't have to go get a special
You don't have to worry
license.
about, some of the CDLs.
Or hire someone, because
Right.
then you're kind of, you're mitigating that's not the reason you got it.
Right.
You don't want to be paying someone $2,000 every time you move it.
Exactly. And this, and one of the photos we put in, which is kind of a whimsical photo, just showing kind of, it looks like a what could go wrong, but at the end of the day, one of the things also when building on a trailer base is you've got a pivot point, so you have to think about balance of weight and kind of weight distribution. Interestingly enough, that particular tiny house is actually one that's designed to be tipped up. So it's brought out to site, backed up, and it's tipped up, and it turns into a tall vertical
Which is so
vertical
cool.
unit for a small kind of infill project. So.
Yeah. So the weight is definitely an issue. Like you don't want to pull up to the weight. That happened on Tiny House Nation. We were like, please tell us that it's going to pass, because that was really scary. And it kind of did. I think they might have fudged a little bit because we were a TV show. That happens.
Right.
Going to be honest.
Okay.
Okay, rules of the road. What fines?
Yeah, and this is again.
We're all privy to these. Fines.
Yeah, if you do your homework, you really shouldn't. You don't want to end up that guy on the side of the road that's got the state police behind them, kind of going over kind of everything that going over your home. At the end of the day, some general rules of thumb: stay within sort of the DOT max sizes for loads. Any of you guys that have hauled heavy equipment to and from sites to do site work, excavation, that kind of thing, are probably pretty familiar with this. You want to stay kind of 8.5 feet wide,
Yeah.
13.5 feet or
12.
lower. Those are kind of maxes. You can do oversized loads, but again, it gets very kind of cost prohibitive if you plan on moving it around a lot.
Which most of the clients calling don't really want to move it more than like once or twice a year. But, 8.5 feet wide, y'all, I mean, like,
That's this.
it's tiny. It's more than this, but it's tiny.
Right.
But the way you design it, it's all about that and like making sure it feels good when you're inside. But that 8.5 and 13.5 is really important. Like that includes the overhangs and the eaves and the siding and
Right.
it's fun. It's a whole new challenge when you're doing design for tiny homes because like we did for Extreme Makeover, you just the bigger the better, it didn't matter. With this, it's like more challenging actually because you have to calculate every single inch. Every single inch matters.
Right.
Otherwise, you'll be this guy that like clips his roof off under the bridge.
Right.
And then you're really living under a bridge.
Right.
You're homeless.
And again, some of this, I'm going to touch on some subjects that you guys are probably familiar with. If you're looking at a structure that's going to be mobile, you really want to, you're looking at weight distribution. Really the two most commonly used methods, it's going to be wood frame or steel. With wood, we're all familiar with wood framing. You've got standard construction details. There's not a whole lot that's going to be significantly different than building just a wood frame structure on your property. One of the downsides is that you can get into higher weight, and then also just some of the quality of dimensional materials and that sort of things now. With steel framing, lighter weight, a lot of, in terms of kind of green and kind of carbon footprint, a lot of steel studs made out of kind of recycled material. Again, steel framing, that tends to be more of a commercial skill set than some of our, a lot of us have in a residential background. And also the average consumer that's doing this themselves, they're not going to be able to go to a big box store and get the correct gauge of metal studs to build this themselves. So, there's a couple that, again, a lot of the framing details are things that you're all familiar with, but typically it's going to be wood frame or steel.
I kind of like this from the design perspective. I think the steel is smart because, obviously if you're doing it yourself, you're going to go to Home Depot and you're going to get wood. But if you're hiring professionals, which we all hope they are in this room, right? You hope for a steel frame because the steel frame is lighter, and then guess what? That means that we have more weight to be able to use on the pretty things that we see, which are the flooring and the finishes.
Right, or personal effects, that kind of thing. So,
yeah.
Right.
The big TV that you don't fit in a tiny house.
Right. Yeah, and this is kind of one of the things that when you're building a tiny house that you really have to consider is what you're really doing is you're building for both seismic conditions and for wind conditions. So a lot of the forces, uplift, racking, sliding, God forbid overturning, are all things that...
I've seen that happen, the overturning.
Yeah, that you
it
have
was
to,
in Ghana, West
for.
Africa, so...
Yeah, so while you're going down the road, you're going to get some, you're going to get some of this, and then you're going to get a little bit of this, and so a lot of those forces that are being exerted on the structure are going to be things that you typically wouldn't have with a site-built building, short of high wind zones and those sorts of things. So
it's just a strapping. It's a matter of strapping.
Right. So what you're doing is we're using Simpson hangers, Simpson clips, Simpson tie downs, which are all things that we're familiar with here.
Yeah. Okay, so layout and impact on design. So here's the thing: when this movement first came out, it was, and this still is kind of what we're seeing, but we're gonna change that. When we first started seeing this come out, it was like wooden-sided boxes, like
a wooden shoebox.
A shed. It looks like you're living in a shed.
Yeah, went to Home Depot, bought a shed, put it on a trailer,
Nobody really
got a tiny
wants
house.
to live in a shed.
Right.
So let's not make it look like a shed.
Right.
Right?
Right. So what we're seeing is a lot of use of multiple structures. So you'll have you can have one or two trailer-mounted structures that then get brought to the site and then mated up to each other, whether it's parallel or perpendicular. Just like with floor plans, kind of changing orientation to kind of create indoor and outdoor spaces between them, so that you're not always looking at kind of that sort of prototypical like single wide type layout that a lot of people think of when they think of a tiny house.
With the loft up top.
Right.
We don't have to do it that way.
Right.
I actually have a client that has one on her property, and then she got one for her 17-year-old son, which is very cool because it's like he's got his own little space and he's learning how to like grow up.
Right. Or not.
Or not.
Right.
Maybe he just has parties in there. Anyway,
Right.
so this is probably the case. So with the designs, like this was one that I did in Austin. This was on Tiny House Nation. It's 2 trailers next to each other. What's beautiful about this layout, and it's all about pushing the creative envelope, right? I know you builders love to push that creative envelope, right? This is 2 trailers next to each other, and it makes, honestly, when you're in this space, y'all, it feels like it feels like a nice 1-bedroom apartment. It does not feel like a shed whatsoever, actually.
Right, and a lot of kind of mating these structures together, and it's, again, these are all kind of, as we talk about this, what you'll start to see as kind of a common thread is that a lot of the things that we're talking about today are things that people are asking for, kind of indoor and outdoor spaces. Gathering spaces on main floors that open up into the backyard. A lot of transparency between inside and outside.
That's right, which
Right.
I love that.
Right.
Okay, big old question.
Yeah.
How do I heat? Because you don't want to feel like you're living in the shed, where it's hotter than,
Yeah. Anyone that's been in their attic in the summer here in Texas, or been out in their shed,
or
just-
driving a 77 truck yesterday with
Right.
no AC.
Right.
How
Yeah,
do
you
we
kind of go
insulate
outside,
that?
you smell burning hair, and it's like, yeah, so insulation's really important. We tend to recommend like spray foam insulation. It's a smaller space, just because you're not just insulating, but you're also weather sealing. And I know that for those of you that have to build in different municipalities with that you do your whole house tests and looking at kind of air infiltration and efficiency, for a client that is worried about cost and a client that doesn't want to have high utility bills, I mean, if you insulate a tiny house poorly, and you're seeing a lot of that now with do-it-yourselfers who have put bad insulation into their bats or bibs into their walls, didn't air seal, and they're seeing high utility bills because they're just a lot of their HVAC and costs and electrical costs are just kind of literally going out through the floor. We're seeing a lot of the DIYers, wishing they'd gone with spray foam insulation.
Yeah, like spend a little bit more money and get the spray foam.
Right. And it can also make the structure a little more rigid as well, depending on which type of spray foam you use.
Yeah, like SIPS panels and things like that.
Right. Right. Also, again, ductless split systems, things that small systems that you would normally use for a small structure, guest house, garage conversion. Those are all very appropriate kind of solutions for heating and cooling a tiny house. Yeah. So, So this very despondent-looking guy on a toilet is actually, this comes from some product literature for a composting toilet. Composting toilets, especially for off-the-grid use, a lot of, if you're going to approach the plumbing in one of 2 ways. You're going to approach it like an RV, where you're collecting everything. You may be discharging your gray waters, kind of holding on to the black water, which is basically all the solids. Yeah.
We can say that word
Yeah,
in
we can
here.
say solids.
It's a safe
There are
space.
a couple of the words, the solids. So, and this, that photo actually, that kind of very despondent IKEA guy, came from product literature for a composting toilet from a manufacturer called Sunmar. On the Tiny House Nation project I did for some clients, they had come to the table with this composting toilet. And I will be the first to tell you, I was not sold. And at first I saw that guy in the literature, I was like, well, he doesn't look that happy about being here. This clearly is not a good solution for this issue.
Who wants to buy that toilet?
Right. At the end of the day, solids are collected. They kind of start, developing a compost. They also get kind of hauled out. Liquids kind of get discharged. Now that I've seen a composting toilet installed, they're actually very effective. They have a built-in kind of fan that kind of, takes care of a lot of the, the stale air.
Yep.
And so composting toilets are a very common solution to a tiny house. If you're
There's one that buries and the sun emits the gas, and you don't even have to change it, like a doggy bag. You don't do that.
Like curbing
yourself. The sun just
Yeah.
takes it away. So, hey, maybe that's why it's called Sunmar.
Right.
I just realized. I just made that up.
So-
Hopefully, no Sunmar rep is in here.
No, it's a great product. I mean, I
Yes.
kind of fully stand behind it. For plumbing, you're going to be really looking at either collecting or tying into a system, tying into your house. A lot of people are adding like an RV port to their home, tying into their existing wastewater, if they've got the capacity to handle that.
Yeah, and I've gotten the question like, am I gonna have to bathe in a creek?
Right.
Like, no, you don't have to bathe in a creek.
Right.
We can fit like tubs in there. Actually, on Tiny House 1, we did a wine barrel tub. That one was fun.
Right.
Like, you can get creative with the tub too. So that's plumbing. So onto the fun stuff. We went from toilets to the fun stuff. So toilets, that wasn't fun. So how do I personalize it? So how do we make sure it doesn't look like a wooden shed, right? I say you gotta just put like a ton of character behind it. Think of it in terms of what's cool about tiny homes is because it's smaller, you can have more fun with the finishes. You can get more creative. You may or may not, most of the time, wouldn't have an HOA that's saying like has to be this specific, percentage of materials on the exterior, or you can't do a hot pink front door, like you can't.
Because if you're in an area that has a very stringent HOA, there's a very good chance that you're probably not going to be building a tiny house or a mobile tiny house behind your structure because it won't be allowed. It'll be more or less kind of deemed not in line with the character of the community. So.
Yeah, exactly. So, personalize it. So the roof design is one of the biggest, we know we've got this footprint, right, of 8'6" by 13'6" or whatever trailer size you've got. But that's kind of, where you start in terms of the massive design. But then the roof design is so important because Absolutely. This is where you really, makes or breaks the space.
Well, that's where, if you look at Kim and I, she's kind of like, I'm a regular size house. She's kind of a...
I'll get real with y'all.
Yeah, she's kind of, tiny house. The needs for kind of headroom, usable space inside, the roof design, it's a lot like any of us that kind of have designed with kind of maximum height restrictions when we have a client that wants either 2 stories, 3 stories, how you kind of get as much usable space within that building envelope as possible. I know that on a lot of projects we've worked on, especially tiny house projects, where we've looked at some that may not have been designed as well, that Kim kind of just breezes through it, and I kind of go in and it's just like, and I'm walking into different things and kind of bouncing off of kind of some low slung fixtures, when the roof design isn't really focused on. So the goal is really to maximize as much usable space as possible, make sure that you can still meet your DOT regulations, and because every inch matters, what you're really looking at is also your lumber sizing, looking at your rafter size. Going from a 2x6 to a 2x8, it takes inches off your headroom. So you're doing everything you can to kind of sometimes decrease the spacing between your members so that you can go with a shallower member to get as much headroom as possible.
Yeah, definitely. I'm a fan of the single slope a lot of times because you're able to kind of go lower on one side and you get the height on one, the focal wall, and then you put transoms up there. And
it gives you a sense of volume.
Yeah, it gives you a sense of volume.
Right.
I like that. Mm-hmm.
I have words. I have the best words.
You're really good at words, so I like it. Okay, so we've been outside. Let's go inside. This was the same house that you saw earlier in Austin. I believe that tiny spaces can have really big impacts. Like, I think that just because it's small doesn't mean it can't be really fun. I think it can actually be really more fun. So this is inside, and this is that 2-trailer house where we have the living all in one trailer and the bedroom and bathroom in the other. And y'all, this literally feels great inside. Like it's everything you need. Like how many people now more and more are, this maybe goes back to the millennials, but they're watching TV and movies on Netflix now, like with laptops and stuff. I know that you guys like your big TVs and stuff, but.
Sure. Well, and also, if you look at this space, I don't know if anyone here, go on vacation, go to a bed and breakfast, or you've stayed in a guest house where you kind of look around and it's not a huge space, and you're like, I could live in this. I don't really need that much more. That's kind of a lot of what we're seeing now, especially with some of these clients, where they're basically saying, I need a kitchen, I need a dining area, I've got a place to sleep, and I need my living room, and then give me some indoor-outdoor space. And the rest of the time, they're out. They're not at home.
That's right. It's kind of like less is more, honestly. So the other question I get is it going to feel really claustrophobic? That's where we bring in windows and sliding doors and A lot of the people that want tiny homes also are nature lovers, and they want to be outside. And y'all, in this house, there's a spot for your guns and your fishing poles. I mean, we've got that in here too. Not that we should talk about guns. Fishing poles, that's what's up there. But you still, these are nature-loving people who want to be outside. They want to spend time outside. So bringing the outdoors in, kind of making it all feel like one big space, like you said.
Yeah, indoor-outdoor space. Again, which again, it goes back to these are all things we're already doing. So there's sort of a misnomer that a lot of what this sort of tiny house thing is it's very kind of, it's kind of this dark art, and there's a lot of weird stuff going on. It's a lot of the same principles that we use every day in kind of house design. There's nothing that's that radically different. It's just on a smaller scale. That's
true, and I'm glad you said that because I get to talk about color, which I love. So, okay, color, y'all. The other thing is, okay, so I have a really small, and this applies to your home designs just like you said. If I have a really small room, do I have to just paint it white because that makes it feel bigger? No, whoever said that, y'all? Life is too short for only white. So put some color in there. You can totally have fun with color. It's a way to make it unique. What I love about tiny homes is you can make this so unique, just like the owner, really make it home for them.
Right, and one of the things to consider also, since it isn't a large space, you can actually explore that a little bit, and if you paint a wall a certain color and you decide you don't like it, it's not a huge investment to try another color out.
That's so true. It's like 1 extra gallon. Okay, so visually we think about, in terms of color with tiny, smaller spaces. One of my tricks actually is to paint all of the walls and the ceiling the same color, and then it feels bigger inside. Or to kind of a visual optical illusion with this house. I did the ceiling black, which is probably kind of makes some of you go, huh? Black ceiling and then black tile on the back wall, so it makes it feel like longer and wider actually. What you're doing is using color and texture to, you put yourself in a box, you feel like you're in a box, and then you use color and texture to make your eyes go further out. So it's kind of just an optical illusion. Texture is another thing. This is actually a tiny house we did on Tiny House Nation. The owners were more bird people. We have a lot of bird people, actually. They own a nonprofit called Windows to the World. They basically travel around and talk about birds. Kind of cool.
And that's one of the things where texture is kind of really interesting and really key is that, in tongue and groove or in a vaulted space that's 15, 20 feet above your head, you're not interacting with on a very kind of human scale, as opposed to in a smaller structure, you're going to be, that texture is going to be right here in front of you. So there's a lot of opportunity to use different materials, kind of nicer textures, or different things that kind of, that read a little better, kind of closer up.
Up close and personal, because it's right there. So this house, we kind of gathered old material, like reclaimed material, and made it feel kind of like a bird's nest, which was fun for this group, because that's what they were doing. But yeah, I actually sided this house myself. Okay, elements of surprise. So you have this tiny space, and the way to design it to make it have impact, and also just to personalize it, is to give yourself give your client something, these little moments of kind of storytelling inside your home. This is a tile, so every morning when they wake up, they see on the floor, you look good. You may not feel like you look good, but you look good. And that's how you're gonna start your day out. So, but in terms of finishes, getting kind of back to the building side of it, you really wanna think about, this is going back to what Jonathan said, you're building for an earthquake or a hurricane kind of, so you wanna get the smaller mosaic tiles. Drywall's not, you can do it, but it's not maybe the best.
Yeah, for something
finish.
that's going to be moved a lot, having a drywalled wall or a structure with a finish that may get compromised with any sort of rattling or shifting, unless you kind of embrace the fact you may have to touch it up.
Yeah, like American clay. You
right.
Can just,
That's why you see a lot of use of wood finishes and plywood and different things like that that are used to kind of also create some additional shear and structural support inside too.
Totally, and keep the texture. So the other key word to this and the success of building a tiny home well is this one word, multifunctionality. Everything in the home has to kind of do more than one thing. Right. For example, this is a bench between the two trailers, and we saw 20 inches of space, and we're like, it was hollow. So you're thinking, you know, when your client goes, I still have all this stuff I need to fit in here. Where's that going to go? Oh, P.S. I have 2 dogs and 2 goats. You're like, I don't know if you should have done this, but that's okay. We'll figure it out. So we opened that space underneath the bench, and that's where the goats live or sleep at night.
Right. Which then goes back again to the where the goats. Yeah.
Goats.
Yeah. Where homeowners basically built-ins, things that maximizing the space that you have. I mean, I don't know how many times I've gone through a pre-cover-up walkthrough with a homeowner, and they'll say, well, what's kind of going on in here? Can we use that space? Can we, open that up? And it's when you're building in a small scale like that, you have to maximize all those little nooks and crannies. It's very similar to almost like boat building. Yeah.
Boat building,
Right.
yeah, totally. This is true. Okay, so what doesn't fit in a tiny house besides the goat? Actually, we fit the goat in.
Right. Yeah, but there's just if part of this whole kind of building on a small scale really gets into kind of reevaluating what stuff you really need. And a lot of, as part of the Tiny House Nation show, there was kind of an exercise they did with a twin-size bed that you're kind of familiar with.
Yeah, like we would tell clients, like whatever you really want to take with you in your next home, try to just put it on this twin-size bed. You've probably seen that on the show. And it's a good exercise, like maybe it's a little extreme, but it makes them think, like, what do I really, really need to take with me? What do I use every day? What's important?
Right.
And the reality is, when clients call and want this, like, there are sacrifices that have to be made. This is not a McMansion. There are definitely sacrifices. Like, one thing I tell people right off the bat is, like, you may or may not have room for a dishwasher. I mean, do you want a stove or do you want a dishwasher? Well, you could probably wash your dishes with your hands.
And it also depends on how you're handling your wastewater.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, so there are definitely things you kind of have to give up, but what I've recognized is, like, once you give those up, you're like, I didn't actually need that anyway. Yeah. Life is really comfortable with less sometimes.
Yeah.
There's beauty in simplicity.
Right.
And how many things do we have in our garage? My dad's here, like, Daddy, you're guilty of this. Like, don't even try to walk through his garage, because it's packed with stuff. I love you, but whoa.
Yeah, but how many things do we have kind of sitting around that you walk through your garage and you get hung up on every time you go through it, and you're like, I gotta get rid of this.
Yeah, like Goodwill is our best friend. Goodwill loves this movement.
Yeah.
Just keep Goodwill in business.
Yeah.
So
some things you might not want to bring with you. Yeah, the gazelle. That's not coming with you. Yeah.
See?
See?
My dad has
case
one.
in point.
Y'all.
Case in point.
We have to talk later. I know.
Yeah.
I've been
The gazelle.
intervention.
Yeah.
It's time for intervention.
Yeah. The gazelle is not coming with you.
I knew you had
there are a lot of things that we all collect, and a lot of things we all hold on to. And at the end of the day, some of the stuff is just
you don't really need this. Like, we have the green
go
belt. Go run on the green belt.
Yeah. I can.
Fresh hair. What? Get rid of it,
Yeah,
right? Sorry, Tony. Sorry, Tony. Oh, the ponytail.
Yeah. So a lot of common questions that we get. How much does it really cost? If someone's doing it themselves and they're really bootstrapping, just hard material costs between $15,000 and $20,000. That may not $25,000 may not include the price of the trailer, but that's with the consumer doing a lot of the work themselves. As builders, especially for really building this out and going to have it completely kitted out and ready for move-in, you're really looking at somewhere between $30,000 to $65,000, and even sometimes upwards of $80,000, completely finished. And what's interesting about this is, and I look at it from sort of a bricks and mortar sense and kind of a revenue stream. When you start looking at kind of multiples of these, it becomes a very viable source of business, and also a viable source of kind of ancillary income for your companies. And just as kind of Kim and I were talking about today, we're seeing 3 to 6 people daily contacting us about projects in this price range. So if you start multiplying that out over kind of number of projects a week, and you're getting 3 to 6 calls a week, and you convert a number of those to viable projects, you're looking at millions of dollars potentially a week.
Yeah, so if the tiny home movement isn't for you, it is for people, it's for a lot of people, and so we have to pay attention to that in the industry. And then, you'll get the question, like, can I finance my tiny home? Well, the answer is, it's still so new to the market, but there are definitely lending agents that are onto this, and banks that are onto this, and they know there's a need, and it's not so different than taking a loan out for an RV if it's mobile.
Correct.
And if it's on a foundation, it can be a construction loan.
Right. There's a handful of banks now that have actually started lending programs specifically for these types of projects. So when lenders, and in our minds, and this is kind of, as we say, as lenders start to recognize atypical situations and start being willing to lend on those situations, it kind of also helps us kind of emphasize that it is a market that's emerging, but it's also something that's very, very viable.
It's here to stay. So where do I park my tiny house? This is the other question.
Right.
Park it where you want to park it.
Right.
I'm just kidding.
And that's where you get into. It goes back to the two different types of homes. Whether you're building an accessory dwelling unit, traditional brick and mortar foundation, you're going to be working under the auspices of your local zoning department relative to kind of minimum sizes, because there are minimum requirements for acceptable sizes for dwelling units, as well as kind of maximum sizes. But for mobile structures, you're going to have to really. It also, some of it falls under planning department. A lot of it also, if it's considered an RV and it's mobile, a lot of zoning departments have regulations pertaining to how long someone can occupy that RV, and even if they can, a lot of them are not enforcing that unless a neighbor complains or someone brings it to their attention. So a lot of this right now is kind of in a very transitional period in terms of what's acceptable with local municipalities.
Yeah, the beauty is there's some gray area.
Right.
Great.
Yeah, and a lot of that is kind of in flux, and a lot of zoning departments are having to kind of figure out how to cross that bridge, because they're getting more and more call for it.
That's right. And then how do you connect to the utilities? It's
either you're connecting like a standard structure, tying into your house, sub-panel, what have you, an RV connection, or if you're opting for something that's truly mobile and you're going completely
off the grid.
Yeah, boondocking. Yeah, you're just kind of. Yes.
You're the guy with the crocodiles. Yep. Okay, resale value. Also, this is one of those things where, because it's so new to the market, we don't have a ton of data on this, but we think it's comparable to kind of an RV. Better than an RV, but
for a mobile structure.
For a mobile structure.
And again, a lot of that depends on its use, depends on its life cycle, depends on how kind of beat up or not the previous owner, and how well they've maintained it. And the other thing that we see a lot is also kind of, how am I going to be taxed on this? And a lot of it depends on how you handle, how the construction is kind of addressed, whether it's considered an accessory unit, it's in a secondary structure to your building, where it's going to be taxed like an improvement on your property, or whether it's being taxed like an RV, a boat, and a piece of personal property. So you kind of see it on both sides. And again, taxation, some of the different tax authorities and different taxing departments are still kind of trying to wrap their mind around how we handle this, because it is kind of straddling two different governing bodies right now, and both of them are kind of looking at kind of how they can also make sure they're getting their appropriate revenue.
Totally.
Yeah.
Okay, so what if I do want to go off the grid? And we've touched on a lot of this, but that composting toilet, solar panels are options. Kind of utilizing the design like an RV, and we've got propane tanks and.
Yeah, you're using a lot of the technology that's designed for RV use, marine use, 12-volt systems, battery banks, use of solar panels. Seen some cases even using small turbines and things like that to generate power, and then at the same time you're also having to handle kind of water storage, tanking fresh water.
This is a real commitment, though, on the customer's part, and I only see probably 20% of the people calling that are actually willing to commit to this.
Right.
Okay, so where else are we seeing tiny homes? This I kind of love because it goes back to kind of the why and the lifestyle, but you've got these spaces in the backyard that maybe you're, as a family, you're spending a ton of money on gym memberships, and you have land, so why not put a little 10 by 12 and then have your own gym? Right. I mean, that essentially is a tiny home. You guys are probably already building flex spaces.
Right. And then this is, again, I know I kind of sound like I may be harping on a little bit, but a lot of the things that we are already doing that our clients are asking for, the flex spaces, the granny flats,
the casitas,
the garage conversions, the accessory dwelling units. These are all tiny houses. It's the same principle. And sometimes, we're all kind of working around it being a complete secondary unit by maybe we don't have a stove in it, we have a microwave instead, or maybe we have a stove but we don't have, a bathroom. There's a lot of different kind of ways that we all kind of work around it being declared a secondary structure if it's not allowed by zoning. But we're already doing this. This is something that's not new to any of us, and it's something that a lot of our homeowners have been asking for.
That's right. And you have two opportunities here. One is to increase your sales revenue, like right off the bat. Consider it like an upgrade for your home you're already building. Two is you have the opportunity to solve a problem for a family, which is so beautiful. Like their mom needs to come home and be closer, and so they get to live in the yard. They can't afford their space, so they put it out on Airbnb. They're a small business, and they need a space to operate out of. You're actually take it to back to a quality of life issue, and you're able to. You're given an opportunity to be able to help a family in a big part of their lifestyle.
Absolutely, which goes back to our sort of stewardship for our clients and kind of making sure that we're looking out for their best interests and their needs.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and then, you also see, like, there's so many TV shows right now, like mom caves, man caves, he shed, she shed. Why are we seeing all of this tiny house luxury? I mean, it's all over the map. We're seeing it because people want it. So that's why we absolutely have to pay attention to this.
Right.
And get all the data. So, and going back to stewardship, it's like, I don't know how many of you have heard of Mobile Loaves and Fishes, but it's in Austin. Yay! I was actually out there last weekend, and we took a house and did the interiors, and it was super fun. But you're able to see, like, the tiny homes are giving an opportunity for lower income housing, and in Austin, it's getting homeless people off of the street. They're able to pay like $200 a month. Obviously, they're qualified to get into this. There's about 150 homes out there,
right.
And for $200 a month, the person has a roof over their head, which is awesome. Like, they're not under that bridge anymore. And so, to me, besides quality of life for our customers, like I can get behind this because it's helping the world through design and build.
Right, and it's, many of us have probably worked on habitat projects and those sorts of things. These tiny structures also create a moment of entry or ability to enter that kind of the not necessarily nonprofit, but some of the community service projects at a lower level too that may not be quite as daunting as kind of the larger
That's
habitat
true.
project. Because in a lot of cases, especially dealing with homelessness or affordable housing, what someone really needs in terms of space doesn't necessarily have to be 1,500 square feet or 1,800 square feet.
Yeah.
It can be a couple small structures.
Yeah, this kind of gets
nestled
them
together.
back into, it's a good step for them. It's
Absolutely.
not intimidating or overwhelming. So to kind of wrap up, for us, like, Airbnb, back to that, their tagline right now on their website right now says belong anywhere. Like, I love this because you have a sense of belonging. Tiny homes are giving us this exploration, this adventure spirit, this place to go anywhere, live anywhere, live where you want to call home. But, like Leonardo da Vinci said, simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. Like, there's beauty in less.
Right. Yeah, and again, it goes back to, Airbnb. It's a revenue stream for homeowners. There's a lot of emphasis on for a lot of millennials in general too, mm-hmm. Refocusing on kind of quality of life, the mobility, the lower taxes, not having to worry about your monthly your mortgage payment every month.
Yeah.
And that's created kind of this new focus.
Yeah, at the end of the day, like, we're building homes so that people can live a good life. And so whatever that looks like, tiny homes, like, add it to the bucket of things you offer, and that's, you're just giving somebody an opportunity to let go of whatever their past is and to move into their future with what they really just need to have a good life. So.
Yeah. So on that note, I think I know we've kind of used up our time.
Yeah.
We really appreciate you guys.
I hope you're believers now.
Yeah.
Hopefully you're believers.
Thank you, Tim and Jonathan.
Thank you very much.
Mike's on. Let's give them another round of applause.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone, for being here. And I believe the trade show floor is now open. So thank y'all very much.